Hey, so this is the second in my videos about my lathe. Again, most of it's going to be about stepper motors, but in the second video I'm just going to concentrate on this lathe, why I got this mini lathe, or this particular mini lathe. It's made by a lot of manufacturers. Then we'll have a look at some of the common things that people do with these lathes when they set them up, and I spent a week or two going through, cleaning it all, making sure there's no grit in it, adjusting everything that needed adjusting, making sure everything was rigid, wouldn't move around. And at the end of that I'll show you the lathe actually working. I think it worked out fairly well. It seems to do pretty good cuts. Like I said, this is just the second video is really just about the lathe, and then in the videos after that I'll get back into looking at the stepper motor and how I'm going to attach it to the lead screw here, and probably try it out and see whether it's going to work or not. A lot of the information about setting up these lathes I found on other YouTube videos, so I'll put a lot of the links that I found useful down in the description below, because I don't get into a lot of depth about how I adjusted things or what I was looking for. I went looking for a mini lathe over Christmas, so I looked at a whole bunch of them. There's some, they're all based on the same basic castings that come out of China, but different companies have different accessories and different builds of carriages, and the way they put these together, and different levels of quality. Sort of upmarket ones are ones from Grizzly and the Little Machine Shop, but they were kind of out of my price range, but they seemed the nicest ones. So for what I was looking at, I was probably looking at either one from Harbor Freight. So you can see the one I was looking at here, which is a 7 by 12 inch mini lathe, or this one on eBay, which is a very generic one, which is a 7 by 14 mini lathe. And I'll just go through, I actually in the end chose the eBay version of the mini lathe. I was kind of aware that probably none of these mini lathes have the highest quality, and for every review I've seen on YouTube, everyone seems to take them totally apart, cleans them of all their grits and things, and usually finds some things that need to be fixed before they feel they can use them, and then need to do things like tighten up gibs and align tailstocks to make sure they work well enough for what they're trying to do with them. So let me just run through this mini lathe that was on eBay. It's from a company called Premiumautopart. So the first thing is, if I was getting one off eBay, I wanted to make sure I was getting it from someone who had a pretty good reputation. And looking at the seller feedback here, they're doing pretty well with 98.8% good feedback. And some of the things that I was looking for in the lathe, so let's roll down here. And this is kind of their second better quality lathe. They have one here for $505, which doesn't have as many accessories as this one. So I'll go through some of the accessories I'm picking up too, which is probably worth the $70 extra. So some of the things I was looking for were it's nice to have a longer lathe. So this one has a ability to do 14-inch work in it, which is 2 more inches than the larger Harbor Freight one offered. I was thinking I was probably wanting to put a motor on this lead screw here. I see a lot of people talk about doing that, and using that as an alternative to using the gearing and the head to drive the lead screw. So I thought if I build that, something that will be useful is having an easy way to connect to it. And this one here has a hex nut on the end that should be a good place where I can connect a motor to. Something else, this one just connects directly from the motor up to the spindle that the chuck is on. So there's just a belt between that and the spindle for the chuck. There's no extra gears in between, whereas something like the Harbour Freight one, the back of that has gearing, which may give you more torque from the motor at lower revs, but it's just that extra bit more complication to it. So I thought minimizing the amount of things between the motor and the spindle will probably make it go smoother. This one has a lock on the tailstock, or a easy to use lock on the tailstock. You can see it here where it's just this large handle which you push backwards and forwards to lock it. Whereas on the Harbour Freight and a lot of the other ones, you have to bolt it down to lock the tailstock, and a lot of people complain about that and actually usually modify them to put a lever in to do that. So having it there already is a bonus. This version is the upmarket one from this company, so has metal hand wheels here, whereas on the Harbour Freight one it's plastic, and even the hand wheels for the cross slides kind of look fairly decent. This one has a tachometer or a speed display on it, so it'll tell me how fast the chuck's going, which could be useful if I'm doing the same thing multiple times to be able to get the correct speed dialed in. Having that speed display will help with that. This one again is the upmarket one, so it comes with metal gears for the gearing. On the Harbour Freight one, it's a type of plastic, probably still decent and just as easy to use, but I just thought it'd be nicer to have metal gears than plastic ones, and that's a upgrade that a lot of people do to their lathes anyway, so might as well get it included in the lathe. Another nice accessory that comes with it is, here's the accessories. The eBay one has the basic tooling that comes with it, and the main ones I'm interested in is the left hand and the right hand turning tools. So getting those thrown in saves a few bucks without having to buy them later on. This has a 3/4 horsepower motor in it. I think the Harbour Freight one has a 3/4 horsepower motor as well, but by the look of it, that's kind of the minimum that you want to be able to work a lot of different materials on the lathe, especially at lower speeds. One big benefit, this one's got a lower price even with the upgraded package and the added accessories. This one's just $597 versus $779 from Harbour Freight. And when I looked through the reviews for this one that came from premiumautopart, they seem to get good reviews. Again, no one's paying me to do this as a review. I was just looking for what I'd prefer, and being aware that I'm going to have to do a lot of work to get the lathe working properly. Probably with either of them, it seemed better to start with this lower price one and just face any problems as I get on. This one has a warranty too. I think for the first 30 days you can return it. So if I found something on the lathe that was just totally broken and wasn't going to allow it to work, that gave me more confidence that I'd be able to get it fixed as well. So I ordered the lathe on eBay, got delivered about a week later, came on FedEx. Feel sorry for the FedEx driver, it's about £100 this crate. If I was there I would have helped him get it out of the truck. Hopefully he's didn't hurt his back too much doing this. I left a trolley for him anyway, so it made it a little easier, or somewhere to put it. It came in this wooden crate. So this will give you an idea of what it's like getting the lathe out of the box. I wanted to preserve the box in case there's anything major wrong with the lathe and I had to return it, so I'd need the box in that case. So it comes in a pretty assembled state. So most of the main components are already attached to the lathe, and there's a accessory box down the bottom. Okay, to help me go through and set up the lathe, I made a little checklist. So this is in the ourChecklists program. I've got another set of videos about writing this one in the past. Basically, it's just a little checklist of things I should do before I'm using the lathe. Let's have a different view of it where we can see the details. And I'll make a PDF printout of this and include it as content with this video down in the description if anyone's interested in having the same checklist available to them. But the things I'm going to go through is do a visual check, check electrically that it's grounded, going to check on the motor, make sure it's all set up correctly. I'm going to check on the tailstock, the top slide on the carriage, the cross slide on the carriage. Going to check on the chuck, probably take it apart, clean it out. I'm going to check on the saddle, which the cross slide sits on. Going to check on the lead screw, thread gearing, do a spindle and faceplate check. Going to run the motor to check that out when it's running. Some more electrical checks on it. I've got some options in here on things I may want to add to it, either now before I use it or later on. Probably most of these will be later on. So like add a apron shield, add a carriage shield to stop swath falling on the carriage, add a carriage lock, maybe repaint the base. And these are all things that other people have done to these mini lathes, so they're very optional, and they'll probably be down the road. I might get the urge to do this. Create a workbench where I can roll the lathe around, so rather having it sitting permanently on my workbench. Putting wider feet on it. People have complained that they don't seem the most stable because the feet aren't very wide on it by default. Reassemble it, re-grease it. I want to document the lathe a bit, so some of the things I find out about the lathe when I disassemble it, document some of the sizes of screws and things like that, and possibly add some new handles to the cross slides if those ones are a bit too hard to use. So that's the plan. So I'll just go through quickly what I found out when I did the visual check, and some of the things that I did fix up as I went along and got this lathe ready to go. Okay, let's have a look at some of the things I had to do to clean up my lathe. So as well as totally disassembling it, removing all the grit and grime and grease and re-oiling it, show you some of the things that I ran into. None of it's totally unexpected. I know people with these lathes do have to do some work on them, so I was pleasantly surprised that it wasn't too bad what I had to do. Now the belt on the motor was super tight. I could actually play a tune on it. I think it must have dropped down during shipping, so I could loosen off the motor and readjust it to give the belt a better tightness with a tiny bit of slack in it. There was extra paint all over the place. You can see some paint on the spindle here where they just missed painting the back of it. Paint along the rails here, this grey paint along the side. I had to clean all that up. And then there was paint. You see the red paint here, it wasn't too accurate, so I had to clean that up as well. Next problem I had was with the gears. It was really hard to remove them. The bottom gear, it looked like someone had actually hit it on with a hammer. And if I put it under a microscope, you can kind of see the ding from the hammer here. It probably misshaped it a bit. You can see there's a bit of a bulge in the circular part here, as well as needing a lot of degreasing, deburring. And you see it doesn't fit on with that keyway there. So I filed down the keyway, cleaned up the gears. After all that, I found that everything fitted on a lot better. There's quite a bit of cleanup to do of the gears. I also, once I'd cleaned them up, I also put them on a piece of cardboard and counted all the teeth, so I could then write the number on the outside of the gears. I didn't have any indicator on them. I noticed there was a missing oil fitting at the headstock end of the lead screw. So there should be a fitting here to put oil in using an oil can. And you can see down the other end what it should look like. So the fitting should be ball oil that looks like that. It's not here. I was having a terrible problem where the carriage was making a terrible noise. I moved it up and down the bed. It seemed to be rubbing on the lead screw, and when I turn the lead screw you can see how it gets closer and further away from the half nut here. So I think it must be rubbing on that. I didn't have a great solution at the moment, really just to position the lead screw. I painted a mark on it where it doesn't touch the half nut, but I probably still need to do some more work on that to make sure it totally doesn't touch that half nut. The rubbing noise is gone. Okay, when I got it, the tailstock wasn't aligned with the center of the chuck. So you see there I've got an Allen key where I can do a sideways adjustment, slide it backwards and forwards to line it up, and there's also a screw underneath where you can sort of do a camber adjustment to make sure it's going purely horizontal. Next up was to remove and clean up the chuck. Notice I use a piece of board underneath the chuck just to make sure I don't drop it on the ways when I disconnect it. You can see inside the chuck is pretty gooey and had a lot of grit inside, so I cleaned it out mostly using WD-40, made sure all the grit was gone anyway. I did deburr it as well on the surfaces and on the spiral and on the jaws. Seemed to be a lot smoother after that. Also, while I had the chuck off, I decided to check the horizontal and vertical spindle play. All seems within like 1/1000th of an inch, so it seems pretty good to me. Probably a lot better than I can do with any of my turning. I was checking how much wobble I had on the saddle and the carriage, and there's more than I'd really want to be able to get some good work done. This seems to be mainly due to the saddle retainers on the bottom. These rails, they're not aligned with the actual bed, and so don't have much contact. I saw a lot of people add some grub screws to the saddle retainers, so I'll show you what I did. So it's just a matter of adding some holes, threading them, and then put some grub screws in, and then you can keep the saddle much more aligned with the rail it's running on. Oh, I ran into one problem with the gibs on the top slide. See here, the gib screws don't line up with the indents in the gib here. This one's probably about 5mm out of sync. I've seen this before in other videos where this has happened, so I'll just drill an indent a little further over here so that when I'm tightening up the gibs with these screws, I don't bend the gibs. So I ended up drilling another hole in the gibs just to align with the grub screw, the gibs adjustment. They seemed to work pretty well. Everything seemed to be lined up. As well, I took all the various top slide and the cross slide apart, deburred it all, took all the oil and grease and grit off it, and cleaned it up, re-oiled it, re-greased it. It seemed to be a lot smoother after that. Okay, that's most of the major things I did to the lathe. Probably took me a week or two on and off. It was pretty cold in the garage, so I wasn't doing it too much. But here's a test run of it. So I've got a blank piece of aluminium 1-inch rod here. The chuck's nice and smooth now. When I was putting that in, there wasn't any grinding or anything. So let's turn on the lathe. I was only running this slow speed, probably about 400 RPM. And then I locked the actual carriage to the lead screw so it gives it more rigidity. And I just used the cross and the top slide to face off this piece of aluminium. So as I got into it and got it more even, I was getting quite long swaths of aluminium coming off, which was probably a good sign. Again, that tooling that came with the lathe was, I didn't need to use shims in the tool holder, so that made me fairly happy too. So let's have a look at this after I faced it all off. That's pretty smooth, at least for me. So I'm happy with that.